Priya works as an independent researcher and associated with the Wild Canids Project, India. She is interested in carnivore biology and conservation with a focus on wild felids in northeastern India and striped hyenas in northwestern India. Wild Canids also runs an interesting blog, called the E-Den blog, and I'm sure that there's a lot of interesting information that Priya will give us today. So over to you, Priya.
Hi, my name is Priya Singh, and I'm representing the Wild Canids India project. I'm going to be talking about harnessing public interest in wild canids and the striped hyena with the aim of making conservation assessments in India. Wild canids have a vast distribution across India in terms of latitudinal range and in terms of elevational gradient. They're also found across a diversity of habitats ranging from desert systems to grasslands to forested areas. And some species of canids also share ecological requirements with those of the striped hyena. Given these similarities and several other similarities between the two groups, we decided to incorporate the striped hyena also as one of our focal species for the purpose of our project work. These species collectively are found in protected areas, they're found outside of protected areas, they're found in agroforestry landscapes, in agropastoral landscapes, and yet they remain poorly studied, to the extent that until very recently, we did not even have updated maps for these species at a countrywide level. Given the overlap between these species and human use landscapes, it is important that we come up with a long-term policy for the conservation of these species, and that's one of the objectives of our project. Our target species include the Indian or the Bengal fox, the Tibetan fox, the red fox, and the desert fox, which is a subspecies of the red fox, the Tibetan wolf and the Indian wolf, the jackal, dhole, and the striped hyena. Our objectives are to generate updated maps for each of these species at a countrywide level, to look at ecological, biogeographic, and social factors that influence their distribution, quantify key threats to all of these species, and identify areas rich in canid diversity and suitable to be called canid conservation units, and of course contribute to eye ecology in this process by using information which is already available online on these species to better understand natural processes associated with these species, and at the same time generate an interest in citizen scientists and other people towards these species that we are interested in. We also hope that through this process, we would be able to come up with a decentralized approach to carnivore monitoring in India. Our project was executed in 4 phases. The first phase focused on citizen science data, where we invited contribution from citizen scientists using a web-based survey link. And we also referred to other citizen science repositories online, like India Biodiversity Portal and iNaturalist, to look for information of interest to us. Through this process, we generated over 1,000 records, out of which 916 records were used for the purpose of our work. And maximum number of sightings were obtained from Karnataka, followed by Rajasthan and then Maharashtra. In the process of this data collection, we received over 770 records of direct sightings of canids or striped hyena, and 140 data points that we received were those obtained via camera traps, while 143 data points were obtained from other citizen science portals. Our second phase involved web surveys, where we looked for information on species of interest to us on social media platforms and other biodiversity repositories online like India Nature Watch. All of this survey was conducted in a period of 2 months, and maximum records that were found were from Maharashtra, followed by Gujarat and Karnataka, and 66% of our data was obtained from Facebook. The third phase dealt with literature surveys, where in a period of 2 months, we looked for information on all published data points that were published in scientific papers or unpublished theses or reports submitted to funding agencies which were available online. And in total, we were able to generate 4,437 data points. of which over 2,500 data points were either directly contributed by citizen scientists or passively contributed by them via social media platforms. All of this data that was collected for the period starting from 1st of January 2015 to December 31st, 2018. And the reason for this was because we wanted to make sure that our maps were updated based on recent information. The last phase of our project dealt with collecting ancillary information, which was sourced through either government repositories or remotely sensed data or from published information. And this information was to constitute the variables that we were going to use for our statistical modeling in the future. Our results suggested that most of the sighting records that we had received were from outside protected areas, except for those of the Dhol and the Tibetan fox. But Tibetan fox, we had very little information, so please look at those results with caution. We also found that most species that we received records of were found to be social and were more than one individuals. We used all our data points to generate occupancy maps for the entire country for each of the species. And this analysis was conducted in an occupancy framework to account for partial detectability, which is an issue with data sets of this nature. We also we built a set of candidate models using single or additive effects of the various variables, which I've already described before. And the percentages that you see there are estimated occupancy percentages for each of these species. And as you can see, golden jackal had a vast distribution across India, while Tibetan wolf had the most restricted distribution or occupancy across India. These are some of the most updated maps that you will find for any of these species at a countrywide level. We also generated conservation scores for each of these species, where we used a three-layered process. So we incorporated protection status for each of the species. We looked at their distributional extent, which was based on the occupancy data that we had derived. And the third component looked at information that was derived via interviews with experts based in field, which looked at components related to population trend for each of these species, ecological factors, human interactions, effects of dogs, and we assigned weights to each of these three levels of data, or three levels that we had incorporated. The highest weight was assigned to the distribution extent because it relied on the occupancy data which we had generated, which is a quantitative metric. The second highest weight was assigned to protection status, and the lowest weight was assigned to the interview-based data. And the scores generated from this were added up and were allocated to each of the species accordingly and allowed us to determine their conservation status in India. Our results generally, or in brief, state that suggest that the Tibetan wolf has the most restricted occupancy in India, while the golden jackal has the most expanded occupancy in India, or the largest occupancy in India, while prey showed a positive correlation with the Indian wolf and the dhole. Dhole was positively associated with protected areas or forested protected areas, while it was negatively associated with high human density or high livestock regions. Grasslands, scrublands, and open habitats were positively associated with fox species, and the striped hyena was positively associated with areas with boulders. Jackals were found to be positively associated with human settlements, and interestingly, with free-ranging dogs. We also used a prioritization tool to identify areas most important for canid conservation across the country, and found for which we used canid diversity indices, habitats, human population, and poverty indices. And we found that protected areas covered 26% of the canid conservation units that we identified, which were located across 103 talukas. We also found that at a state level, conservation assessment, where we tried to determine the ability of a state or the likelihood of a state to be able to provide protection or conserve canids, Madhya Pradesh, Karnataka, and Chhattisgarh were the highest ranked, when we incorporated the budgetary allocations for forestry and wildlife services, while Rajasthan, Gujarat, and Maharashtra had high potential for canid conservation, but needed to increase their budgetary allocations for forestry and wildlife-related services. We also looked for infrastructure-related projects over the last 5 years for the entire country and came across over 1,100 projects earmarked for the entire country. Out of these, we could spatially locate 1,073 projects and found that 41% of these projects overlapped with canid conservation units, which we had identified. These were not the only findings from our study. We were also able to generate an interest among citizen scientists by inviting them to write blog posts on our website about their experiences with different canids or with the hyena. And we also continue to put all this information out on our website and continue to update it on a regular basis. Our team comprises of all these people, and we are open to receiving contributions or citing records from on hyenas and canids from across India at our website. And this will allow us to continue improving our distribution maps for these species while also monitoring these carnivores in real time. And I would like to thank all of these people involved with the study in some way or the other, or people who have helped us achieve what we did. Thank you.
Thanks, Priya. That was a great talk.
Welcome. Can you see?
Can you hear us?
Just give me a second. Yeah, can you see? You're welcome.
Yeah.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, great. So we have a few questions. Prabhakar asks, there is a spread of camera traps data. Are you using camera trap data from private fields? Any idea on the growth of camera traps across India?
Well, so we actually relied on camera trap data that came into us through our web-based survey link. So if anybody felt the need to contribute their camera trap sightings, they could do it through that. We did not focus specifically on private lands because we tried to go in for uniform sampling. So we, got data from all kinds of habitats. And sorry, I missed the second part of his question. Can you repeat that, Nandini?
He basically wanted to know if there's increased camera trapping across India today. If there's a lot more people doing this.
Yes, of course, there is increased camera trapping across the country today. But much of that data may be out of our reach because it may be with government institutions or other similar bodies who may not want to share that data.
Okay. Priya, Madhura is asking you a question. Why did you restrict your literature survey to only 2 months? Could you have spent more time and effort in searching for more records?
Oh, well, so I'll just clarify that. We spent 2 months. We were 7 of us. So our team comprises of 7 members. So 7 of us looked for information on the 9 species, subspecies that we are interested in. And we spent 2 months doing the literature survey to get information on 4 years of data on these species. Basically, this was just the timeline we followed. So in 5 months, we collected all our data cumulatively.
All right. Nishant has a question. Which citizen science portals did you look for data in about wild canids?
We looked at INAT. We looked at Mammals of India, India Biodiversity Portal.
Okay. Madhura has another question. Multi-pronged approach really helps for data collection. What is the minimum mapping unit for the occupancy analysis? Is it a district?
So I'm sorry, again, I didn't mention that. Our independent spatial unit for sampling in this case was Taluka.
Okay. And Robin has a question. Could you comment on gaps in citizen science data for these taxa and how that may impact some of these results?
Well, so what we found was we had limited data for Tibetan fox. In fact, we had only 13 records for it altogether. So that's why you see the analysis is kind of limited. and we haven't been able to generate occupancy maps for them. So there are certain species, especially the species found in high elevation areas like the Tibetan wolf and the Tibetan fox, which we had limited data for. Whereas species like dholes, which are found in protected areas, we actually got a lot more data for them. Or because most people go to these places for photography and other reasons. So I think, and they're willing to contribute to our citizen science portals. So we got a lot more information on them and on jackals.
All right. Anand Meherwade has a question. Can a 6-month-old observation be contributed? He's seen a dhole at one particular area.
Of course, you're welcome to contribute it because we are once again open to contributions. So we are once again accepting or receiving data from 2015 onward.
Okay. All right. These seems to be the questions we have so far. We usually have questions coming in a few minutes after a talk. There is one more down in the thread. Did you focus on any national parks or wildlife sanctuaries for your work? Or was it more widely distributed?
Well, so we did not focus on any protected area as such, but when we were modeling this data, when we were doing our statistical analysis, we did take protected areas into consideration as one of the covariates for detection probability.
Okay. All right. You have many compliments on the thread. So I would like to request you to spend a few minutes answering people on Slack and interacting with them, even when you're far away from civilization or with somewhere with poor internet.
Thank you, Nandini. But just one more, I'd like to add that my colleagues Arjun and Aditya, Arjun Srivathsa and Aditya Banerjee are also there right now on Slack.
Oh, great.
And they will also be taking questions on behalf of Wild Canids India project because we work as a team and we all handle different aspects of this project. So yes, they will also be open to taking questions.
Okay, great. We have a few more minutes. We can maybe handle one or two more questions. Amit Kaushik wants to know, what are the plans to use these results in policy making?
Yeah, so, well, we basically, we published a paper out of this data, and one of our analysis dealt with identifying areas of importance to canids, and we call them canid conservation units. So basically, we've used a process of spatial prioritization to identify these units. And this is for across India, because as many of us know, canids are not restricted to just protected areas in India. They're found across, all kinds of habitat types and areas with different, ranges of human densities. So, canid conservation units basically take into account canid richness, habitats, poverty levels, human population levels, and you basically get a map of which areas are important for canid conservation. And we've also taken into account states which are most capable of doing canid conservation, or focusing on areas for conservation of canids, where we've also taken into account forestry and wildlife budgets, like I mentioned in the talk. So we hope to share this information with the states, with selected states. So we are already in the process of identifying states that we'd like to share this information with, and hopefully, we can help, or we can request the states to identify certain areas and keep them aside for canid conservation, and not have projects, mass projects like solar power plants or something earmarked for those areas.
Okay. All right. One last question from me, since we're waiting for more questions. Did you find that some canids associated more in human-dominated areas?
Yes, I think jackals were found to have a positive association with human settlements and free-ranging dogs. And this is perhaps because they have more scavenging opportunities around urban areas or, human habitation.
Okay. All right. All right. So I think we should end the session now. Thank you so much, Priya. Over to you, Farida.
So thank you, and Priya, that was a wonderful talk. And we've had 3 speakers since the morning today, along with the keynote speaker Naveed, and we had Paul, we had Rain, and then Priya. All of them will be still on the Slack channel. So we are ending the session now. The questions, if any, please keep posting them on the channel, and our speakers will be around to answer them. We will rejoin at 12:25. So see you all again on Slack at 12:25. Thank you.